Question 1. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly prioritizing the development of robust active shooter response plans. As a certified security instructor, CSI, which of the following approaches to developing and implementing such a plan best aligns with a proactive, risk-based security strategy and regulatory expectations for emergency preparedness? Option A. Implementing only basic first aid and de-escalation training for all employees, assuming these are sufficient to manage any active shooter incident. Option B. Utilizing generic, widely available active shooter training modules without adapting them to the specific physical and operational characteristics of the organization. Option C. Focusing primarily on employee comfort and avoiding any direct discussion or training on active shooter scenarios to prevent potential anxiety. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive, site-specific risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities, analyze threat likelihood and impact, and inform the development of tailored response protocols. The correct answer is D. Conducting a comprehensive, site-specific risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities, analyze threat likelihood and impact, and inform the development of tailored response protocols. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because developing and implementing effective active shooter response plans requires a delicate balance between proactive risk mitigation and the sensitive nature of preparing for a low-probability, high-impact event. Instructors must navigate potential employee anxiety, ensure plans are practical and actionable, and remain compliant with evolving security regulations and best practices. Careful judgment is required to avoid over-reliance on theoretical models that may not translate to real-world effectiveness or underestimation of potential threats. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential vulnerabilities, analyzes threat likelihood and impact, and prioritizes mitigation strategies. This aligns with the fundamental principles of security management, which mandate a systematic and data-driven approach to risk. Specifically, regulatory frameworks often require organizations to conduct regular risk assessments to inform their security posture and emergency preparedness. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most significant threats and that the response plan is tailored to the specific environment and potential scenarios. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reactive measures, such as only providing basic first aid training without a comprehensive response plan, fails to address the proactive elements mandated by security best practices and potentially by regulations. This neglects the critical need for immediate, coordinated actions to neutralize the threat and protect lives during an active shooter event. Another incorrect approach that relies exclusively on generic, off-the-shelf active shooter training materials without customization to the specific organizational context overlooks the unique physical layout, personnel, and operational characteristics of the environment. This can lead to a plan that is not practical or effective in a real-world incident, potentially causing confusion and delays when seconds count. Regulatory compliance often necessitates that plans be site-specific and regularly reviewed. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes employee comfort over preparedness by avoiding any discussion or training on active shooter scenarios due to fear of causing distress is ethically and professionally unsound. While sensitivity is important, failing to prepare employees for potential threat, however unlikely, can have catastrophic consequences. Security instructors have a duty of care to equip individuals with the knowledge and skills necessary for their safety. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a cyclical approach. First, conduct a thorough site-specific risk assessment. Second, develop a multifaceted response plan that includes prevention, immediate response, and post-incident recovery. Third, implement the plan through comprehensive training and drills. And finally, regularly review and update the plan based on new threat intelligence, lessons learned from incidents, and changes in the organizational environment. This iterative process ensures continuous improvement and adaptability. Question 2. The monitoring system demonstrates that a participant in a certified security instructor (CSI) training session is repeatedly interrupting other participants, making off-topic remarks, and exhibiting signs of disengagement, which is impacting the flow of discussion and the learning experience of others. What is the most effective and professionally appropriate course of action for the CSI to take? Option A. Publicly call out the participant's behavior in front of the group to immediately stop the disruption. Option B. Immediately ask the participant to leave the training session without further discussion. Option C. Privately address the participant during a break. Inquire about any challenges they might be facing, and gently redirect their participation towards the learning objectives. Option D. Ignore the behavior, assuming the participant will eventually self-correct or that the disruption is minor. The correct answer is C. Privately address the participant during a break. Inquire about any challenges they might be facing, and gently redirect their participation towards the learning objectives. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security instructors, CSI, in managing a dynamic learning environment. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to maintain an orderly and productive classroom with the instructor's responsibility to foster an inclusive and supportive atmosphere where all participants feel comfortable engaging. The instructor must act decisively to address disruptive behavior without alienating participants or creating an overly punitive environment, which could hinder learning and violate ethical teaching standards. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes de-escalation and constructive intervention. This approach begins with clear, pre-established classroom expectations and norms communicated at the outset of the training. When disruptive behavior occurs, the instructor should first attempt a private, non-confrontational conversation with the individual, seeking to understand the root cause of the behavior and redirecting them to appropriate participation. This aligns with the ethical obligation of a CSI to facilitate effective learning and maintain professional conduct, ensuring that the learning environment remains conducive to all participants' development. Furthermore, it reflects a proactive and participant-centered approach to classroom management, which is implicitly supported by the principles of professional development and continuous improvement expected of CSIs. An incorrect approach would be to immediately resort to public reprimand or exclusion without attempting to understand or address the underlying issue. This can create an environment of fear and resentment, discouraging participation, and potentially violating the principle of treating all participants with respect and dignity. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the disruptive behavior, hoping it will resolve itself. This fails to uphold the instructor's responsibility to manage the learning environment effectively and can lead to further disruption, negatively impacting the learning experience for the entire group. A third incorrect approach is to overreact with overly harsh disciplinary measures that are disproportionate to the offense, which can be seen as unprofessional and may lead to complaints or a perception of unfairness, undermining the instructor's credibility and the integrity of the training program. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with prevention by setting clear expectations. When issues arise, the framework should guide them through a tiered response. First, private and empathetic communication. Second, clear and consistent reinforcement of expectations. And third, if necessary, more formal disciplinary actions, always ensuring fairness and proportionality. This process prioritizes maintaining a positive learning environment while addressing disruptive behavior effectively and ethically. Question 3. Benchmark analysis indicates that a recent, unverified report has been received by a certified security instructor, CSI, regarding potential disruptive activity during an upcoming public safety training session. The report is vague and does not specify individuals or concrete actions, but it has caused concern among some staff. As a CSI, what is the most appropriate initial course of action to ensure both the security of the training and adherence to all relevant public safety and security guidelines? Option A. Disregard the report as unsubstantiated and proceed with the training as originally planned, focusing solely on the scheduled curriculum. Option B. Publicly announce that a potential threat has been identified and request participants to report any suspicious behavior from individuals who appear to be of a particular ethnic or national origin. Option C. Immediately implement enhanced security protocols, including restricted access and increased surveillance, for the entire training venue, and inform all participants of a heightened security alert. Option D. Consult with the relevant security management team and legal counsel to review the report, assess its credibility, and determine the most appropriate, proportionate, and legally compliant response based on established security procedures. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement enhanced security protocols, including restricted access and increased surveillance, for the entire training venue, and inform all participants of a heightened security alert. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an instructor to balance the immediate need for security with the legal and ethical obligations to provide accurate, non-discriminatory training. The instructor must navigate potential biases and ensure that all training content aligns with established public safety and security protocols, as well as relevant legislation. Careful judgment is required to avoid overreacting to a perceived threat while upholding professional standards. The correct approach involves a measured response that prioritizes information gathering and adherence to established protocols. This means consulting with relevant authorities and reviewing existing security procedures before implementing any new measures. This approach is right because it ensures that any actions taken are based on factual information and are compliant with the regulatory framework governing public safety and security training. It demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and responsible security management, preventing hasty decisions that could lead to legal repercussions or damage to the training program's reputation. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing a broad, unverified security lockdown based on a single, unsubstantiated report is professionally unacceptable. This fails to adhere to due process and could lead to unnecessary disruption and alarm, potentially violating individuals' rights and creating a climate of fear rather than security. It bypasses the critical step of verification and risk assessment, which are fundamental to effective security management and are often implicitly or explicitly required by public safety regulations. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the report entirely without any form of investigation or consultation, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates negligence and a failure to take potential threats seriously. Public safety regulations mandate a proactive approach to security, requiring instructors to assess and mitigate risks. Ignoring a credible report, even if unconfirmed, could have severe consequences if the threat materializes, leading to liability for the instructor and the organization. Finally, an approach that involves implementing security measures that disproportionately target or profile specific groups based on the vague nature of the report is ethically and legally reprehensible. This violates principles of fairness and non-discrimination, which are cornerstones of public safety and security training. Such actions would likely contravene anti-discrimination laws and ethical codes of conduct for security professionals. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes 1. Acknowledging and documenting the report. 2. Consulting with supervisors and relevant security personnel. 3. Gathering additional information to verify the report's credibility. 4. Assessing the potential impact and likelihood of the threat. 5. Developing and implementing proportionate and legally compliant security measures. And 6. Documenting all actions taken and the rationale behind them. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and legally defensible. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a certified security instructor, CSI, is developing a new training module on incident response protocols. The instructor has extensive personal experience in this area, but needs to ensure the module strictly adheres to the regulatory framework and learning objectives specified for the CSI certification. Which curriculum development approach best aligns with these requirements? Option A. Focus on incorporating the instructor's most impactful personal anecdotes and experiences from past incident responses, assuming these will provide the most practical and memorable learning for candidates. Option B. Select a widely recognized, generic incident response training package and adapt it minimally to fit the CSI context, prioritizing speed of development over granular alignment with specific certification requirements. Option C. Develop the module based on the instructor's interpretation of what constitutes essential incident response knowledge, without explicit reference to the CSI curriculum or its governing regulations, to allow for greater flexibility and innovation. Option D. Prioritize the development of lesson plans and training materials that directly map to the official CSI learning objectives and regulatory requirements, using a systematic instructional design process to ensure comprehensive coverage and appropriate assessment methods. The correct answer is D. Prioritize the development of lesson plans and training materials that directly map to the official CSI learning objectives and regulatory requirements, using a systematic instructional design process to ensure comprehensive coverage and appropriate assessment methods. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a certified security instructor, CSI, must balance the need for comprehensive training with the practical constraints of time and resources, while strictly adhering to the regulatory framework governing security training. The instructor must ensure that the curriculum development process is not only effective in imparting knowledge and skills, but also compliant with the specific requirements of the Certified Security Instructor, CSI, examination's regulatory jurisdiction. This requires a nuanced understanding of how to prioritize content, select appropriate training methodologies, and document the development process in a way that meets established standards. The correct approach involves systematically analyzing the learning objectives, identifying the core competencies required by the CSI certification, and then designing lesson plans and training materials that directly address these objectives in a structured and progressive manner. This approach ensures that the curriculum is aligned with the examination's stated goals and the underlying regulatory framework. Specifically, it prioritizes the development of materials that are accurate, relevant, and demonstrably capable of preparing candidates to meet the certification standards, thereby fulfilling the instructor's ethical obligation to provide high-quality, compliant training. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the instructor's personal experience or perceived importance of certain topics, without a systematic alignment to the CSI curriculum objectives, would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the defined scope and requirements of the certification, potentially leading to training that is either insufficient or covers extraneous material, both of which are regulatory and ethical failures. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes the use of readily available, generic training materials without critical evaluation for relevance and compliance with the specific CSI framework would also be a failure. This overlooks the instructor's responsibility to ensure the training is tailored and meets the precise standards mandated by the certification's governing body, risking non-compliance and ineffective preparation for candidates. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough review of the official CSI curriculum guidelines and any associated regulatory mandates. This should be followed by a needs analysis to identify the specific knowledge and skills gaps the training must address. Subsequently, the instructor should develop learning objectives, design content and activities that directly support these objectives, and establish methods for evaluating learning. Throughout this process, continuous reference to the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines ensures that the developed curriculum is both effective and compliant. Question 5. Quality control measures reveal that a recent security training program for new recruits, mandated by the Certified Security Instructor, CSI framework, has been criticized for being overly theoretical and lacking practical application, despite being delivered within the allocated budget and timeframe. As the CSI responsible for developing and delivering this training, which instructional strategy approach would best address these criticisms while adhering to the regulatory requirements for effective security training? Option A. Implement a blended approach that incorporates detailed demonstrations and hands-on simulations for practical skills, supplemented by concise lectures for theoretical concepts and role-playing exercises for scenario-based decision-making. Option B. Introduce more complex and extended simulation exercises without providing additional foundational theoretical instruction. Option C. Expand the lecture component of the training to cover more in-depth theoretical aspects of security protocols and legal frameworks. Option D. Increase the duration and frequency of role-playing scenarios to cover all aspects of the security curriculum. The correct answer is A. Implement a blended approach that incorporates detailed demonstrations and hands-on simulations for practical skills, supplemented by concise lectures for theoretical concepts and role-playing exercises for scenario-based decision-making. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Security Instructor, CSI, to balance the need for effective knowledge transfer with the practical constraints of a limited budget and time. The CSI must select instructional strategies that not only meet the learning objectives, but also adhere to the regulatory framework governing security training, ensuring that the training is both compliant and impactful. The pressure to deliver high-quality training under these conditions necessitates careful judgment and a deep understanding of pedagogical principles within the specific regulatory context. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a blended strategy that prioritizes demonstrations and simulations for practical skills, supplemented by targeted lectures for theoretical knowledge, and role-playing for scenario-based decision-making. This approach is right because it directly addresses the practical, hands-on nature of security roles, which are often governed by specific operational procedures and regulatory compliance requirements. Demonstrations and simulations allow learners to observe and practice critical tasks in a controlled environment, minimizing real-world risk while maximizing skill acquisition. Lectures are used efficiently for foundational knowledge, and role-playing helps develop the critical thinking and communication skills necessary for responding to various security situations, all of which are implicitly or explicitly required by the regulatory framework for competent security personnel. This method ensures that the training is not only engaging, but also directly applicable to the job, fostering a higher level of competency and compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Relying solely on lectures for all aspects of the training is an incorrect approach. This fails to address the practical, hands-on requirements of many security roles and neglects the need for learners to develop muscle memory and situational awareness through active participation. Regulatory frameworks often mandate practical competency, which cannot be adequately assessed or developed through passive listening alone. Focusing exclusively on simulations without foundational lectures is also an incorrect approach. While simulations are valuable for practical application, learners may lack the necessary theoretical understanding of security principles, legal frameworks, or operational procedures to fully benefit from or correctly interpret the simulation outcomes. This can lead to misunderstandings and potentially unsafe practices, failing to meet the comprehensive training standards expected by regulators. Prioritizing role-playing for all learning objectives is another incorrect approach. While role-playing is excellent for developing interpersonal skills and decision-making in specific contexts, it may not be the most efficient or effective method for teaching technical procedures or foundational theoretical knowledge. Over-reliance on role-playing can lead to superficial understanding and may not adequately cover the breadth of knowledge and skills required by the regulatory framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a needs-based assessment of learning objectives. First, identify the core knowledge and skills required by the relevant security regulations and job roles. Second, evaluate the most effective instructional strategy for each objective, considering the practical nature of security work. Prioritize active learning methods like demonstrations, simulations, and role-playing for practical skills and decision-making. Use lectures judiciously for theoretical underpinnings. Finally, ensure the chosen methods are cost-effective and time-efficient while meeting all regulatory compliance and quality assurance standards. Question 6. Strategic planning requires that a certified security instructor, CSI, effectively communicate a new, complex security protocol to a diverse group of trainees. The CSI must ensure that all trainees understand the protocol's critical steps and their individual responsibilities, regardless of their prior technical expertise. Which communication strategy best ensures the protocol is understood and can be implemented accurately and compliantly? Option A. Deliver the protocol using highly technical terminology, assuming trainees will grasp the concepts through osmosis and discourage questions to maintain the scheduled pace. Option B. Present the protocol in a lecture format with minimal interaction, focusing on reciting the official documentation verbatim and dismissing any trainee inquiries that deviate from the script. Option C. Employ a comprehensive communication strategy that uses clear, accessible language, actively solicits and addresses trainee questions, utilizes visual aids, and confirms understanding through interactive methods. Option D. Rely solely on written documentation for trainees to review independently, with the instructor available only for brief, pre-scheduled question and answer sessions at the end of the training period. The correct answer is C. Employ a comprehensive communication strategy that uses clear, accessible language, actively solicits and addresses trainee questions, utilizes visual aids, and confirms understanding through interactive methods. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a certified security instructor, CSI, who must deliver critical information about a new security protocol. The challenge lies in balancing the need for clear, concise instruction with the potential for misinterpretation or anxiety among trainees who may have varying levels of technical understanding and prior experience. Effective communication is paramount to ensure the protocol is understood and implemented correctly, thereby maintaining security integrity and compliance. Failure to communicate effectively could lead to security breaches, non-compliance with regulatory requirements, and a breakdown in operational efficiency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted communication strategy that prioritizes clarity, active listening, and appropriate nonverbal cues. This includes using simple, direct language, avoiding jargon where possible or explaining it thoroughly, and employing visual aids to reinforce understanding. Active listening is crucial, requiring the instructor to pay full attention to trainee questions, provide thoughtful responses, and confirm comprehension. Nonverbal communication, such as maintaining eye contact, using open body language, and modulating tone of voice, contributes to a positive and receptive learning environment. This comprehensive approach aligns with the ethical duty of a CSI to impart knowledge accurately and effectively, ensuring trainees are fully equipped to perform their duties in accordance with established security standards and any relevant regulatory frameworks that mandate proper training and understanding of security procedures. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that relies heavily on technical jargon without adequate explanation fails ethically and regulatorily, because it hinders comprehension and can lead to trainees misunderstanding critical security procedures. This directly contravenes the CSI's responsibility to ensure effective knowledge transfer. An approach that dismisses trainee questions as trivial or time-consuming is professionally unacceptable. It demonstrates a lack of active listening and respect, creating a negative learning environment and potentially leaving trainees with unresolved doubts, which could compromise security protocols. This violates the ethical obligation to foster a learning environment where all concerns are addressed. An approach that focuses solely on delivering information without checking for understanding or providing opportunities for questions neglects a fundamental aspect of effective instruction. This can lead to superficial learning and an inability to apply the protocol correctly in real-world situations, posing a significant security risk and failing to meet the standards of competent instruction. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes clarity, engagement, and verification of understanding. This involves 1. Understanding the audience, tailoring communication to the trainee's existing knowledge base. 2. Structuring the message, organizing information logically and using clear, concise language. 3. Employing active listening, encouraging questions and providing thorough, patient answers. 4. Utilizing diverse communication methods, incorporating verbal, nonverbal, and visual elements. 5. Confirming comprehension, using methods like cue and accessions, practical exercises, or brief quizzes to ensure the information has been absorbed and understood. This systematic approach ensures that training objectives are met and that security protocols are implemented effectively and compliantly. Question 7. The evaluation methodology shows that a certified security instructor, CSI, is developing training materials on physical security measures for a private security firm operating in multiple states. The CSI needs to determine which legal framework, federal, state, or local, should form the primary basis for the training on alarm system installation and monitoring. Which approach best ensures comprehensive legal compliance for the training? Option A. Prioritize federal regulations concerning alarm systems, as they often set national standards for interstate commerce and communication, and then incorporate state-specific licensing and operational requirements where they are more stringent or add specific mandates. Option B. Focus exclusively on the local ordinances of the city where the firm's headquarters is located, assuming these will cover all necessary security protocols. Option C. Emphasize state laws regarding private security licensing and operational procedures, as these directly govern the activities of security personnel within a state's borders. Option D. Rely solely on general industry, best practices, and common-sense security principles, without specific reference to federal, state, or local laws, to maintain flexibility. The correct answer is A. Prioritize federal regulations concerning alarm systems, as they often set national standards for interstate commerce and communication, and then incorporate state-specific licensing and operational requirements where they are more stringent or add specific mandates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a certified security instructor, CSI, must ensure their training content is not only accurate, but also legally compliant within the specific jurisdiction of the United States. The CSI's responsibility extends to understanding the hierarchy of laws and how federal, state, and local regulations interact to govern security practices. Misinterpreting or misapplying these laws can lead to ineffective training, legal liabilities for the training provider, and potentially unsafe security operations for those trained. Careful judgment is required to identify the most authoritative and directly applicable legal framework for the specific security context being taught. The correct approach involves prioritizing federal law when it establishes a national standard or supersedes state and local laws in areas of federal jurisdiction, such as interstate commerce or national security. When federal law is silent or allows for state variation, state law then becomes the primary governing framework. Local ordinances are generally the least authoritative and apply only within their specific geographic boundaries, often supplementing or clarifying state and federal mandates. A CSI must be able to discern this hierarchy and apply the most encompassing and relevant legal standard to their curriculum. For example, if teaching about the handling of regulated materials, federal regulations would likely be paramount. If teaching about private security guard licensing, state law would be the primary focus, with local ordinances potentially adding specific requirements for operating within a particular city or county. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on local ordinances, ignoring the broader implications of state and federal laws. This fails to address the full scope of legal requirements and could leave trainees unprepared for situations governed by higher-level legislation. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize state law over federal law when federal law clearly preempts state authority. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution and the principle of federal preemption. Relying exclusively on federal law without considering state-specific nuances where permitted by federal statute would also be an incomplete approach, as many security practices are heavily regulated at the state level. The professional decision-making process for a CSI in this context should involve 1. Identifying the specific security practice or topic being addressed in the training. 2. Determining the geographic scope of the training, e.g., national, statewide, or local. 3. Researching relevant federal laws and regulations applicable to that practice and scope. 4. Researching relevant state laws and regulations. 5. Researching relevant local ordinances. 6. Analyzing the hierarchy of these laws to determine which are most authoritative and directly applicable, prioritizing federal law where it preempts, then state law, and finally local ordinances. 7. Ensuring the training curriculum reflects the most stringent and comprehensive legal requirements. Question 8. The assessment process reveals that a cohort of new security personnel undergoing mandatory compliance training exhibits a wide range of prior experience and learning preferences. As a certified security instructor, CSI, you are responsible for designing and delivering this training, which is governed by the specified jurisdiction, e.g., UK Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, handbook regulations. How should you adapt your instructional design to effectively meet the diverse needs of this group, while ensuring all regulatory learning objectives are met? Option A. Present the most comprehensive and detailed version of the material, assuming all learners will be able to grasp the advanced concepts through sheer exposure. Option B. Develop a tiered approach to instruction, offering foundational modules for those with less experience and advanced modules for those with more, ensuring all participants engage with the core regulatory content. Option C. Simplify the content significantly to ensure rapid completion, focusing only on the most basic elements of the regulatory requirements. Option D. Deliver the training using a single, standardized method that has proven effective for previous, more homogeneous groups without further adaptation. The correct answer is B. Develop a tiered approach to instruction, offering foundational modules for those with less experience and advanced modules for those with more, ensuring all participants engage with the core regulatory content. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the certified security instructor, CSI, to balance the need for effective knowledge transfer with the regulatory obligation to ensure all training materials are accurate and compliant. Misinterpreting or misapplying instructional design principles can lead to ineffective training, potentially resulting in non-compliance with regulatory requirements, which carries significant risk for both the instructor and the organization. The instructor must demonstrate a nuanced understanding of how to adapt learning objectives to diverse learner needs, while adhering to the strict guidelines of the specified regulatory framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves adapting the instructional materials to cater to different learning styles and prior knowledge levels, while ensuring that the core learning objectives, as mandated by the regulatory framework, remain central and are met by all participants. This aligns with the principles of universal design for learning and adult learning theory, which emphasize learner-centered instruction. Specifically, it requires the CSI to employ a variety of teaching methods, e.g., visual aids, practical exercises, group discussions, and to provide supplementary resources for those who require additional support or advanced exploration. This approach ensures that the training is not only compliant with the regulatory framework, but also effective in achieving the desired learning outcomes for all individuals, regardless of their background. The regulatory framework implicitly supports such an approach by requiring demonstrable competency, which is best achieved through inclusive and adaptable training. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on delivering the most complex version of the material, assuming all learners possess advanced prior knowledge, fails to acknowledge the diversity of the learner group. This can lead to disengagement, frustration, and ultimately, failure to meet the learning objectives for a significant portion of the audience. Ethically, it is a failure to provide equitable learning opportunities. An approach that oversimplifies the material to the point where it no longer adequately covers the essential regulatory requirements or nuances would be a direct violation of the training mandate. This risks leaving participants with an incomplete or inaccurate understanding, leading to potential noncompliance and a failure to meet the core purpose of the training. This is a clear regulatory failure, an approach that prioritizes speed of delivery over comprehension. By rushing through content or skipping opportunities for clarification and practice, undermines the effectiveness of the training. While it might cover all topics superficially, it fails to ensure that participants have truly learned and can apply the information. This is an ethical failure to provide quality instruction and a practical failure to meet the learning objectives. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should first thoroughly understand the mandated learning objectives and the specific regulatory requirements. They should then assess the diverse needs and prior knowledge of their audience. The instructional design should then be built around meeting those objectives through varied, engaging, and adaptable methods. Continuous formative assessment throughout the training is crucial to identify and address any learning gaps. The decision-making process should prioritize compliance, effectiveness, and learner engagement, ensuring that all participants can achieve the required level of understanding and competency. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that effective security instruction requires more than rote memorization. When assessing a learner's comprehension of a new security protocol, which questioning technique is most effective in gauging their true understanding and ability to apply the protocol in a practical scenario? Option A. Focusing on highly technical and obscure questions to test the depth of their knowledge, even if they haven't fully grasped the foundational concepts. Option B. Posing leading questions designed to guide the learner towards the correct answer, reinforcing the instructor's intended message. Option C. Employing a series of open-ended questions to encourage detailed explanations, followed by probing questions to explore the reasoning behind their answers. Option D. Primarily asking closed-ended questions that require simple yes or no responses to confirm basic recall. The correct answer is C. Employing a series of open-ended questions to encourage detailed explanations, followed by probing questions to explore the reasoning behind their answers. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an instructor to move beyond simply delivering information to actively assessing and fostering genuine understanding in a learner. The challenge lies in discerning superficial recall from deep comprehension and critical thinking, which is crucial for effective security instruction, where application of knowledge can have significant consequences. The instructor must employ questioning techniques that elicit more than just memorized facts, pushing the learner to articulate their reasoning and connect concepts. This requires a nuanced understanding of how individuals learn and demonstrate mastery, and the ability to adapt questioning strategies in real time. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves using open-ended questions that encourage detailed responses and probing questions to explore the learner's thought process, Open-ended questions such as, can you explain the rationale behind implementing this security protocol? Or, what are the potential implications of this threat vector? Prompt the learner to elaborate, synthesize information, and articulate their understanding. Probing questions, like could you elaborate on that point? Or, what specific factors led you to that conclusion? Then delve deeper into the learner's reasoning, identifying any gaps in knowledge or misconceptions. This method aligns with the principles of adult learning and effective pedagogy, aiming to build confidence and competence by ensuring the learner can not only recall information, but also apply it contextually and critically. This is ethically imperative for a certified security instructor, CSI, as it ensures the learner is adequately prepared to perform security duties responsibly and effectively, thereby upholding the integrity of the security profession and protecting assets and individuals. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that relies solely on closed-ended questions, such as, is this protocol effective? Or, did you understand the threat? Fails to assess the depth of understanding. These questions elicit simple yes or no answers, providing minimal insight into the learner's comprehension or ability to apply the knowledge. This can lead to a false sense of mastery, which is a significant ethical failure for a CSI, as it risks certifying individuals who are not truly competent, potentially leading to security breaches or failures. An approach that focuses on asking leading questions, such as, you understand that this is the most critical step, don't you? Manipulates the learner into providing a desired answer rather than revealing their genuine understanding. This is ethically unsound, as it compromises the integrity of the assessment process and misrepresents the learner's actual knowledge. It also fails to meet the CSI's obligation to provide accurate and unbiased instruction and assessment. An approach that involves asking overly technical or obscure questions unrelated to the core learning objectives, without first establishing foundational understanding, can overwhelm the learner and create unnecessary anxiety. While technical depth is important, it must be built upon a solid understanding of fundamental principles. This approach fails to effectively gauge comprehension of the material being taught and can be demotivating, hindering the learning process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should adopt a learner-centric approach to questioning. This involves actively listening to the learner's responses, observing their nonverbal cues, and employing a flexible questioning strategy. The decision-making process should prioritize eliciting evidence of understanding and critical thinking over simple recall. When faced with a learner's response, the instructor should ask themselves, does this answer demonstrate a grasp of the underlying principles and their practical application? If not, the instructor should use probing questions to uncover the reasoning and address any deficiencies. This iterative process of questioning, listening, and probing ensures that the assessment is thorough, fair, and ultimately serves the best interests of the learner and the security profession. Question 10. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of security protocol noncompliance due to insufficient learner engagement during mandatory training sessions. As a certified security instructor, CSI, which strategy is most effective in motivating adult learners and maintaining their interest in complex security procedures? Option A. Design training sessions that incorporate interactive case studies, group problem-solving activities, and opportunities for learners to relate the material to their specific job functions, while also allowing for open discussion and feedback. Option B. Focus solely on presenting a comprehensive list of security rules and regulations, ensuring all points are covered verbatim from official documentation. Option C. Deliver the training content through a series of lengthy lectures, emphasizing the legal and regulatory requirements without deviation or opportunity for learner input. Option D. Utilize a standardized, one-size-fits-all presentation with minimal variation, assuming all adult learners possess similar prior knowledge and learning styles. The correct answer is A. Design training sessions that incorporate interactive case studies, group problem-solving activities, and opportunities for learners to relate the material to their specific job functions, while also allowing for open discussion and feedback. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the certified security instructor, CSI, to balance the need for effective knowledge transfer with the diverse motivational needs of adult learners. Failure to engage learners can lead to poor retention of critical security protocols, increasing the risk of compliance breaches and security incidents, which directly impacts the organization's risk profile. The CSI must apply pedagogical principles within the specific regulatory framework, governing security training to ensure both compliance and effectiveness. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that acknowledges adult learners' intrinsic motivation drivers, such as relevance, autonomy, and prior experience. This includes incorporating interactive elements like case studies, group discussions, and practical exercises that allow learners to apply concepts to their own work environments. Providing opportunities for feedback and recognizing contributions fosters a sense of value and ownership. This aligns with the principles of adult learning theory, which emphasize self-direction and experience-based learning, and indirectly supports regulatory compliance by ensuring a deeper understanding and retention of security mandates. The CSI's role is to facilitate learning, not just deliver information, thereby enhancing the likelihood that security protocols are understood and adhered to, reducing the risk of non-compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on lectures and passive information dissemination. This fails to acknowledge adult learners' need for active participation and relevance, leading to disengagement and superficial understanding. It risks learners not internalizing the importance of security procedures, thereby increasing the likelihood of errors and noncompliance, which is a direct failure in fulfilling the instructor's duty to ensure effective training. Another incorrect approach is to focus exclusively on compliance checklists without contextualizing the information or explaining the why behind the regulations. While compliance is a key objective, a purely procedural approach can demotivate learners by making the training feel like a bureaucratic hurdle rather than a valuable skill development opportunity. This can lead to rote memorization without genuine comprehension, undermining the long-term effectiveness of the training and increasing the risk of security lapses. A third incorrect approach is to use overly simplistic or patronizing language and examples that do not respect the learner's professional experience. Adult learners are typically motivated by challenges and opportunities to contribute their knowledge. Dismissing their experience or failing to tailor content to their professional context can lead to resentment and disengagement, hindering their willingness to absorb and apply the security training. This can result in a training environment where learners are present but not truly learning, failing to achieve the intended security outcomes. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should adopt a learner-centric approach. This involves understanding the target audience's background, experience, and learning preferences. The CSI should actively seek to make the training relevant by connecting security concepts to real-world scenarios and the learner's specific roles. Incorporating a variety of teaching methods, encouraging participation, and providing constructive feedback are essential for maintaining engagement. The decision-making process should prioritize creating an environment where learners feel valued, empowered, and motivated to learn, thereby ensuring the training effectively meets both individual development and organizational security objectives. Question 11. System analysis indicates that a certified security instructor CSI program requires a robust assessment framework to ensure instructors possess both theoretical knowledge and practical teaching capabilities. Which of the following assessment strategies best aligns with the principles of comprehensive and valid instructor evaluation? Option A. A combination of a comprehensive written examination covering security principles and relevant regulations, a practical demonstration of teaching a specific security topic, and a performance evaluation of their ability to manage a simulated training scenario. Option B. A single, high-stakes written examination designed to test recall of all security-related legislation and best practices. Option C. A peer review process where experienced instructors evaluate the candidates' past training materials and delivery methods without a standardized rubric. Option D. A self-assessment questionnaire where candidates rate their own proficiency in various instructional and security domains. The correct answer is A. A combination of a comprehensive written examination covering security principles and relevant regulations, a practical demonstration of teaching a specific security topic, and a performance evaluation of their ability to manage a simulated training scenario. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in developing an effective assessment strategy for a certified security instructor CSI program. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for comprehensive evaluation of an instructor's competence with the practical constraints of time, resources, and the specific learning objectives of the CSI curriculum. A poorly designed assessment can lead to unqualified instructors, potentially compromising the quality of security training delivered to future professionals. This requires careful judgment to select assessment methods that are both valid and reliable, aligning with the program's goals and regulatory expectations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted assessment strategy that integrates various tools to evaluate different aspects of an instructor's capabilities. This typically includes a knowledge-based examination to gauge understanding of security principles and regulations, a practical demonstration of teaching skills to assess their ability to convey information effectively, and a performance review of their ability to manage a training environment. This comprehensive method ensures that the instructor not only possesses the theoretical knowledge, but also the practical skills and pedagogical competence required by the CSI certification. This aligns with the principles of robust professional certification, aiming to ensure that certified individuals meet established standards of competence and ethical conduct, as implicitly expected by regulatory bodies overseeing professional qualifications. Incorrect approach is analysis. Relying solely on a written examination while assessing knowledge fails to evaluate critical practical skills such as instructional delivery, classroom management, and the ability to adapt to diverse learning styles. This approach is insufficient as it neglects the performance-based aspects of being an effective instructor, potentially leading to the certification of individuals who can pass a test but cannot effectively teach. Focusing exclusively on a peer review of past training sessions without a structured assessment framework introduces subjectivity and potential bias. While valuable for feedback, it may not systematically cover all required competencies or adhere to standardized evaluation criteria, making it difficult to ensure consistent and objective certification. Utilizing only a self-assessment questionnaire, while providing insight into an individual's perception of their skills, is inherently unreliable for objective evaluation. Self-assessments are prone to overestimation or underestimation of abilities and do not provide verifiable evidence of competence, failing to meet the rigorous standards expected for professional certification. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with developing assessment strategies should adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves clearly defining the learning outcomes and competencies required for the certification. Subsequently, they should select a combination of assessment methods that directly measure these outcomes, ensuring validity, measuring what it intends to measure, and reliability, consistency of results. The chosen methods should be practical to administer and score, and the entire assessment process should be transparent and fair. Furthermore, professionals must consider the regulatory and ethical implications of their assessment design, ensuring it upholds the integrity of the certification and protects the public interest by ensuring only qualified individuals are certified. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that a certified security instructor, CSI, is tasked with delivering a mandatory security awareness training session. During the session, participants exhibit varying levels of prior knowledge and engagement, which facilitation approach best fosters critical thinking and encourages broad participation while adhering to regulatory requirements for effective security training. Option A. Allowing the most vocal participants to lead the discussion and guide the group towards consensus on security best practices. Option B. Primarily delivering factual information and asking participants to recall specific security protocols. Option C. Presenting a predetermined set of conclusions and guiding the discussion to confirm these points, discouraging deviation from the planned agenda. Option D. Encouraging participants to share their experiences and perspectives, posing open-ended questions to explore the why behind security measures, and actively drawing out contributions from quieter individuals. The correct answer is B. Primarily delivering factual information and asking participants to recall specific security protocols. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security instructors, CSI, in a regulated environment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to impart knowledge and ensure compliance with the practical reality of diverse learner backgrounds and engagement levels. A CSI must not only possess subject matter expertise, but also the facilitation skills to create an effective learning environment. This requires careful judgment to adapt teaching methods, manage group dynamics, and ensure all participants, regardless of their initial comfort level, can contribute and grasp the critical security concepts. The professional challenge is to foster an environment where critical thinking is encouraged without compromising the integrity or accuracy of the information being delivered, especially within the strict confines of regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves actively soliciting diverse viewpoints and probing for deeper understanding. This aligns with best practices in adult learning and the ethical imperative for CSIs to ensure comprehension and application of security principles. By posing open-ended questions that encourage participants to articulate their reasoning and connect concepts, the instructor fosters critical thinking. This method directly addresses the regulatory requirement for effective security training that leads to demonstrable understanding and adherence to established protocols. It ensures that learning is not passive reception, but an active process of engagement and critical evaluation, which is essential for building a robust security culture. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to primarily rely on direct instruction and factual recall. While accuracy is paramount, this method can stifle participation and critical thinking by discouraging questions that challenge the presented information or explore alternative perspectives. It fails to engage learners actively and may lead to superficial understanding, which is a disservice to both the learner and the regulatory objectives of security training. Another incorrect approach is to allow dominant voices to monopolize the discussion. This creates an environment where less confident or less vocal participants are excluded, leading to inequitable learning and a failure to capture the full spectrum of potential insights or concerns. It undermines the goal of fostering a shared understanding and can lead to blind spots in security awareness, directly contravening the spirit of comprehensive security education mandated by regulations. A third incorrect approach is to steer the discussion towards predetermined conclusions without allowing for genuine exploration of different viewpoints. This can be perceived as didactic and may discourage participants from thinking critically or questioning assumptions. It limits the learning experience to rote memorization rather than developing the analytical skills necessary to adapt to evolving security threats, which is a fundamental requirement for effective security personnel. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes learner engagement and comprehension within the established regulatory framework. This involves 1. Assessing the learning objectives and regulatory requirements for the session. 2. Planning facilitation techniques that encourage active participation and diverse input. 3. Monitoring group dynamics to ensure equitable contribution and address any imbalances. 4. Employing probing questions to stimulate critical thinking and deeper understanding. 5. Adapting facilitation strategies in real time based on participant engagement and comprehension. 6. Concluding the session with a clear summary that reinforces key takeaways and addresses any remaining questions or misconceptions, ensuring alignment with regulatory expectations. Question 13. Strategic planning requires an instructor to consider their potential legal responsibilities and liabilities. Which of the following approaches best reflects a proactive and legally sound strategy for managing instructor liability in a practical security training scenario? Option A. Focusing solely on delivering the required curriculum content and addressing safety issues only if an accident or injury occurs. Option B. Implementing comprehensive pre-training risk assessments, providing clear safety briefings, ensuring adequate supervision during practical exercises, and maintaining detailed records of safety protocols and incident reports. Option C. Delegating all safety responsibilities to the training facility staff and assuming they have implemented all necessary precautions. Option D. Relying on participants to read and understand all safety warnings and to self-regulate their behavior during training activities. The correct answer is B. Implementing comprehensive pre-training risk assessments, providing clear safety briefings, ensuring adequate supervision during practical exercises, and maintaining detailed records of safety protocols and incident reports. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an instructor to balance the need for effective training with the legal and ethical obligations to protect participants from harm. The instructor must anticipate potential risks inherent in the training environment and implement appropriate measures to mitigate them, thereby fulfilling their duty of care. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal liability. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential hazards within the training environment and implementing reasonable preventative measures. This aligns with the general principles of negligence law, which often hinge on whether a party acted as a reasonably prudent person would under similar circumstances. In the context of instruction, this translates to anticipating foreseeable risks associated with the subject matter and the training delivery, and taking steps to minimize those risks. For a certified security instructor, CSI, this duty of care is paramount, as security training often involves practical exercises that carry inherent risks. Adherence to industry best practices and any specific regulatory guidelines for security training providers, if applicable within the specified jurisdiction, would further solidify this approach. An incorrect approach that involves assuming participants are solely responsible for their own safety fails to acknowledge the instructor's duty of care. While participants have a responsibility, the instructor's role is to create a safe learning environment and provide adequate supervision and instruction on safe practices. Another incorrect approach, which is to only react to incidents after they occur, demonstrates a lack of foresight and preventative action. This reactive stance can be viewed as a failure to exercise reasonable care, as it neglects the opportunity to prevent harm before it happens. Finally, an approach that prioritizes covering the curriculum at all costs, even if it means disregarding safety concerns, is ethically and legally indefensible. The instructor's primary responsibility is the well-being of their students. Professionals should employ a risk management framework. This involves identifying potential hazards, assessing the likelihood and severity of harm, and implementing control measures. Regular review and updating of safety protocols based on incident reports, participant feedback, and evolving best practices are also crucial. A proactive and preventative mindset, grounded in a thorough understanding of the instructor's duty of care, is essential for effective and responsible instruction. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that the upcoming mandatory security awareness training is for a group of experienced security personnel with an average age of 45. As a certified security instructor, how should you best adapt your instructional methodology to maximize their learning and engagement? Option A. Design the training with a focus on rote memorization of security protocols and procedures, using quizzes that test recall of specific details rather than understanding of underlying principles. Option B. Deliver the training in a lecture-based format, focusing on foundational security principles and assuming minimal prior knowledge, with a structured curriculum designed for passive reception of information. Option C. Utilize a purely theoretical approach, presenting complex security concepts and academic research without incorporating practical exercises or opportunities for application. Option D. Employ a highly interactive and collaborative approach, encouraging participants to share their experiences and problem-solve real-world scenarios, while clearly linking the training content to their current roles and responsibilities. Correct answer is D. Employ a highly interactive and collaborative approach, encouraging participants to share their experiences and problem-solve real-world scenarios, while clearly linking the training content to their current roles and responsibilities. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security instructors, CSI, when designing training programs. The core difficulty lies in recognizing that a one-size-fits-all approach to instruction is ineffective. CSIs must adapt their methodologies to the distinct learning characteristics of their audience. Failing to do so can lead to disengagement, poor knowledge retention, and ultimately, a failure to meet the objectives of the training, which could have implications for compliance and operational effectiveness within the regulated environment. The professional challenge is to move beyond simply delivering information and instead facilitate meaningful learning tailored to the learner's stage of development and prior experience. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves applying andragogical principles when instructing adult learners. This means acknowledging that adults are typically self-directed, bring a wealth of life experience to the learning environment, are problem-centered in their learning needs, and are motivated by internal factors such as career advancement or personal growth. Therefore, the instructor should foster an environment of mutual respect, encourage participation and the sharing of experiences, focus on practical application of knowledge, and clearly link the training content to the learner's immediate needs and goals. This aligns with the CSI's ethical responsibility to provide effective and relevant training that equips individuals with the necessary skills and knowledge to perform their roles competently and in accordance with regulatory requirements. The emphasis is on facilitating learning rather than simply imparting knowledge. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that relies solely on pedagogical methods, treating adult learners as if they were children, is fundamentally flawed. This would involve a highly directive, teacher-centered style with minimal learner input, assuming a lack of prior knowledge, and focusing on rote memorization rather than understanding and application. This fails to engage adult learners, leading to frustration and disinterest, and is ethically questionable as it wastes valuable training time and resources. It also fails to leverage the inherent strengths of adult learners, such as their experience and problem-solving abilities. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the learning differences entirely and deliver generic content without any consideration for the audience's age or experience level. This results in training that is either too basic or too advanced, failing to meet the specific needs of the adult learners. It demonstrates a lack of professional competence and a failure to adhere to best practices in adult education, which are implicitly expected of a CSI. A third incorrect approach might involve focusing exclusively on theoretical concepts without providing opportunities for practical application or problem solving. While theory is important, adult learners, particularly in a security context, need to see how the information translates into real-world scenarios and actions. This approach neglects the problem-centered nature of adult learning and can lead to a disconnect between what is taught and what is needed on the job. Professional reasoning. When designing and delivering training, a CSI should first assess the target audience to understand their prior knowledge, experience, and learning preferences. This assessment should inform the instructional design. The CSI should then select andragogical strategies that promote active participation, relevance, and practical application. This involves creating a collaborative learning environment, using case studies and simulations, and encouraging learners to draw upon their own experiences. The CSI's role is to guide and facilitate, empowering adult learners to take ownership of their learning journey. This adaptive and learner-centered approach ensures that training is not only compliant, but also highly effective and impactful. Question 15. Upon reviewing the curriculum for an upcoming Certified Security Instructor (CSI) course, you are tasked with developing the experiential learning module focused on incident response. Considering the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for security training, which of the following approaches best balances the need for realistic application with participant safety and learning effectiveness? Option A. Focus exclusively on theoretical case studies and tabletop exercises that analyze past incidents, without any practical, hands-on simulation of response actions. Option B. Organize a live, unannounced, real-world exercise where participants must respond to an actual, albeit minor, security breach occurring in a public area, with minimal direct supervision to foster independent decision-making. Option C. Design and conduct a series of simulated incident response drills in a controlled training facility, utilizing props and role-playing to replicate various threat scenarios, with clear safety protocols and instructor supervision throughout. Option D. Implement a virtual reality simulation that allows participants to interact with a digital environment representing a security incident, but with limited scope for dynamic decision-making or physical response. The correct answer is C. Design and conduct a series of simulated incident response drills in a controlled training facility, utilizing props and role-playing to replicate various threat scenarios, with clear safety protocols and instructor supervision throughout. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a certified security instructor, CSI, must balance the need for effective, engaging experiential learning with the paramount responsibility of ensuring participant safety and compliance with regulatory requirements. The instructor must select activities that are realistic enough to provide valuable learning, but also controlled and supervised to prevent harm. The challenge lies in identifying the optimal level of realism without introducing undue risk. The correct approach involves designing and implementing simulated scenarios that closely mirror real-world security threats or operational challenges, but within a strictly controlled environment. This allows participants to practice skills, make decisions, and experience consequences in a safe setting. Regulatory frameworks, such such as those governing security training and professional conduct, mandate that instructors prioritize safety and competence. Ethical obligations require the instructor to provide training that is both effective and responsible. This approach aligns with the CSI's duty to impart knowledge and skills in a manner that prepares individuals for actual situations without exposing them to preventable dangers. An approach that prioritizes realism at the expense of safety, by using actual unsecured environments or live, uncontrolled situations, fails to meet regulatory mandates for safe training environments. This could lead to injury, legal liability for the training provider, and a breach of the instructor's ethical duty of care. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on theoretical instruction without any practical application, fails to meet the core objective of experiential learning. This renders the training ineffective and does not adequately prepare participants for the practical demands of security roles, potentially leading to poor performance in real-world situations and a failure to meet industry standards for competency. An approach that uses overly simplistic or artificial scenarios, while safe, may not provide sufficient challenge or realism to develop the critical thinking and decision-making skills necessary for effective security operations, thus failing to deliver on the promise of experiential learning and potentially leaving participants ill-prepared. Professionals should approach such decisions by first identifying the learning objectives. Then, they must assess the potential risks associated with various experiential learning methods. A risk assessment should inform the design of activities, ensuring that appropriate safety protocols, supervision, and contingency plans are in place. The chosen activities should then be evaluated against regulatory requirements and ethical standards for training delivery, ensuring a balance between realism, safety, and effectiveness. Question 16. The control framework reveals a new regulatory mandate requiring enhanced data privacy protocols for all personnel handling sensitive client information. As a certified security instructor, you are tasked with developing and delivering the necessary training. Which of the following approaches best identifies the specific training requirements for this mandate? Option A. Conduct a broad survey of all employees to gauge their general awareness of data privacy principles, and then deliver a standardized training module covering all aspects of the new regulation. Option B. Review the company's existing security awareness training materials to determine if they already cover the core concepts of the new data privacy regulation and update them as needed. Option C. Analyze the new regulatory mandate to identify specific procedural changes and required competencies, then conduct targeted interviews and performance observations with different employee groups to pinpoint existing knowledge and skill gaps relative to these new requirements. Option D. Focus training efforts exclusively on the IT department, as they are primarily responsible for data security infrastructure and will be most impacted by the new protocols. The correct answer is A. Conduct a broad survey of all employees to gauge their general awareness of data privacy principles, and then deliver a standardized training module covering all aspects of the new regulation. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for a certified security instructor, CSI, where a new regulatory requirement necessitates immediate and effective training. Professional challenge lies in accurately identifying the specific knowledge and skill gaps within the existing workforce, ensuring the training is targeted, and that it meets the new compliance obligations without wasting resources on unnecessary content. The instructor must move beyond a superficial understanding of the new regulation to a granular assessment of what specific behaviors and competencies need to be modified or instilled. The correct approach involves a multifaceted needs assessment that begins with a thorough deconstruction of the new regulatory mandate to understand its practical implications for security personnel. This is followed by a gap analysis that compares the current state of employee knowledge and skills against the required state. This analysis should involve direct observation, performance reviews, and potentially pre-training assessments. Crucially, it requires understanding the diverse roles and responsibilities within the target audience to tailor the training effectively. This methodical process ensures that training is relevant, efficient, and demonstrably meets the compliance requirements, thereby mitigating regulatory risk and enhancing operational security. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a general overview of the new regulation is sufficient for all staff. This fails to address specific operational impacts and individual learning needs, potentially leaving critical gaps unaddressed and leading to non-compliance. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the most senior staff, neglecting the frontline personnel who are directly responsible for implementing new procedures. This overlooks the practical application of the regulation at the operational level. Finally, relying solely on employee self-assessments without independent verification can lead to an inflated perception of competence, masking actual deficiencies, and failing to identify the true training needs. Professionals should approach such situations by first meticulously dissecting the regulatory requirement. Then, they should employ a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods to assess current capabilities against the new standards. This includes understanding the target audience's existing knowledge, skills, and experience levels. The goal is to identify specific, actionable training needs that directly address compliance gaps and enhance security posture, ensuring that training investments are both effective and efficient. Question 17. Operational review demonstrates that during a Certified Security Instructor (CSI) training session, a participant becomes visibly agitated and begins to loudly question the instructor's interpretation of a specific security protocol, disrupting the flow of the class and causing discomfort among other attendees. The instructor needs to address this situation effectively. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the professional standards and ethical guidelines for a CSI? Option A. Engage in a public debate with the participant, challenging their understanding of the protocol and asserting the instructor's authority. Option B. Acknowledge the participant's frustration, calmly ask them to articulate their specific concerns, and then explain the rationale behind the protocol, offering to discuss it further during a break to maintain the session's momentum. Option C. Immediately inform the participant that their behavior is unacceptable and that they will be removed from the training if it continues, without further discussion. Option D. Ignore the participant's outburst and continue with the lesson, assuming they will eventually calm down on their own. Correct answer is B. Acknowledge the participant's frustration, calmly ask them to articulate their specific concerns, and then explain the rationale behind the protocol, offering to discuss it further during a break to maintain the session's momentum. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professionally challenging situation due to the inherent unpredictability of human behavior under stress and the potential for rapid escalation of conflict. The instructor must balance the need to maintain a safe and productive learning environment with the ethical obligation to address disruptive behavior constructively. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the individual's intent and emotional state, and responding in a manner that de-escalates the situation without compromising the integrity of the training or the safety of other participants. Careful judgment is required to avoid misinterpreting the individual's actions or reacting in a way that inadvertently fuels the conflict. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves actively listening to the participants' concerns, acknowledging their frustration without necessarily agreeing with their premise, and then calmly redirecting the conversation back to the learning objectives. This strategy aligns with the principles of professional conduct expected of a certified security instructor, emphasizing empathy, respect, and a commitment to facilitating a positive learning experience. By validating the participants' feelings and offering a clear path forward, the instructor demonstrates effective de-escalation, which is a core competency for maintaining order and ensuring the effectiveness of security training. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes the well-being of all participants and upholds the instructor's responsibility to manage the learning environment professionally. Incorrect approach is analysis. Dismissing the participants' concerns and immediately resorting to disciplinary action is an incorrect approach. This fails to acknowledge the individual's emotional state and can be perceived as confrontational, thereby escalating the situation. It violates the ethical principle of treating individuals with respect and can undermine the instructor's credibility. Furthermore, it neglects the opportunity to understand the root cause of the disruption, which might be a misunderstanding of the material or a personal issue that could be addressed constructively. Ignoring the participant's behavior and continuing with the lesson is also an incorrect approach. This demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and an abdication of the instructor's responsibility to manage the learning environment. It can lead to resentment among other participants who may feel their learning is being compromised, and it allows a potentially disruptive element to persist, increasing the risk of further escalation. Ethically, it fails to ensure a safe and productive learning environment for everyone. Challenging the participants' authority or knowledge in a confrontational manner is another incorrect approach. This directly escalates the conflict by creating an adversarial dynamic. It shifts the focus from de-escalation to a power struggle, which is counterproductive to effective instruction and can create a hostile atmosphere. This approach is unprofessional and ethically unsound, as it prioritizes personal ego over the educational goals and the well-being of the participants. Professional reasoning. Professionals in security instruction should employ a de-escalation framework that prioritizes active listening, empathy, and clear communication. When faced with disruptive behavior, the initial step should always be to assess the situation calmly and non-judgmentally. The instructor should then attempt to understand the participant's perspective, acknowledge their feelings, and validate their presence, even if their behavior is problematic. The subsequent step involves redirecting the conversation or behavior toward the learning objectives, setting clear boundaries, and offering constructive solutions or alternatives. If de-escalation proves unsuccessful, the instructor should follow established protocols for managing persistent disruption, which may involve seeking assistance from supervisors or security personnel, always prioritizing safety and the integrity of the training. Question 18. Examination of the data shows that during a recent simulated security exercise, several procedural gaps and technical weaknesses were identified within the training facility's security systems and protocols. These vulnerabilities, if exploited, could compromise the integrity of future training scenarios and potentially expose sensitive information. As the Certified Security Instructor, CSI, what is the most appropriate course of action to address these findings? Option A. Inform the training participants of the identified vulnerabilities to foster awareness, but defer any remediation efforts until after the current training cycle is complete to avoid disruption. Option B. Document all identified vulnerabilities, conduct a thorough risk assessment to prioritize remediation efforts, develop a formal remediation plan, and present it to relevant stakeholders for approval and implementation. Option C. Immediately implement ad hoc fixes for the most obvious vulnerabilities to ensure the next training session is secure, without formal documentation or assessment of other findings. Option D. Overlook minor procedural gaps as they are unlikely to be exploited in a training environment, and focus only on the most critical technical weaknesses with immediate, undocumented adjustments. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement ad hoc fixes for the most obvious vulnerabilities to ensure the next training session is secure, without formal documentation or assessment of other findings. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified security instructor, CSI, to balance the immediate need for operational security with the long-term imperative of continuous improvement and compliance. The instructor must make a judgment call on how to address identified vulnerabilities without causing undue disruption or compromising the integrity of ongoing training exercises. The decision-making process must be grounded in the regulatory framework governing security training and operations, ensuring that all actions are both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of vulnerability assessment and remediation, aligning with the principles of responsible security management. This approach prioritizes the identification, analysis, and mitigation of weaknesses in a structured manner. Specifically, it requires the instructor to 1. Thoroughly document the identified vulnerabilities. 2. Assess their potential impact and likelihood of exploitation. 3. Develop a prioritized remediation plan. And 4. Communicate this plan to relevant stakeholders for approval and implementation. This aligns with the CSI's ethical obligation to maintain high standards of security and to ensure that training programs themselves are secure and effective. Regulatory frameworks for security training often mandate such a proactive and documented approach to risk management, emphasizing the need for continuous assessment and improvement of security systems and procedures. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the identified vulnerabilities due to operational pressures. Failure to address known weaknesses directly contravenes the CSI's duty to uphold security standards and could lead to breaches, compromising training integrity, and potentially violating regulatory requirements for secure training environments. Another incorrect approach would be to implement immediate, ad hoc fixes without proper documentation or assessment. This can lead to unintended consequences, introduce new vulnerabilities, or fail to address the root cause of the problem, thereby not meeting the standards of due diligence expected of a CSI. Furthermore, failing to communicate the findings and remediation plan to appropriate management or oversight bodies represents a significant ethical and regulatory lapse, as it bypasses necessary approval processes and accountability mechanisms. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape. This framework should include 1. Comprehensive data gathering and analysis of identified issues. 2. Risk assessment to prioritize actions based on potential impact and likelihood. 3. Development of a clear, actionable remediation plan. 4. Stakeholder consultation and communication. And 5. Documentation of all steps taken. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both operational needs and regulatory compliance. Question 19. Assessment of a certified security instructor's response to a disruptive individual at a training event, where the individual is verbally aggressive and refusing to leave, but not physically threatening. The instructor has successfully used verbal commands to de-escalate similar situations in the past. Option A. Physically restrain the individual using a higher level of force, such as a takedown, to ensure immediate compliance and prevent further disruption. Option B. Attempt further verbal de-escalation, and if unsuccessful, consider escorting the individual out of the premises using minimal physical contact, only if necessary and proportionate to the objective of maintaining order. Option C. Ignore the individual's behavior, assuming they will eventually leave on their own, to avoid any potential escalation. Option D. Immediately call for additional security personnel to physically remove the individual, without further verbal engagement. Correct answer is B. Attempt further verbal de-escalation, and, if unsuccessful, consider escorting the individual out of the premises using minimal physical contact, only if necessary and proportionate to the objective of maintaining order. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an instructor to balance the immediate need for control with the ethical and legal obligations to use only necessary force. The instructor must accurately assess the threat level and the subject's compliance in real time, making split-second decisions that have significant consequences. The use of force continuum provides a framework, but its application demands nuanced judgment, considering individual circumstances and the specific regulatory environment. The correct approach involves de-escalation as the primary strategy, moving up the continuum only when necessary and proportionate to the threat. This aligns with the fundamental principles of responsible security practice, emphasizing the preservation of life and the avoidance of unnecessary harm. Legally and ethically, security personnel are trained to use the minimum force required to achieve a lawful objective. This means exhausting all reasonable de-escalation techniques before resorting to physical intervention, and if physical intervention is necessary, employing the lowest level of force that effectively neutralizes the threat. This approach is supported by common law principles regarding self-defense and the prevention of harm, as well as specific training standards and codes of conduct for security professionals, which prioritize lawful and proportionate responses. An incorrect approach that involves immediately escalating to physical restraint without attempting verbal commands or de-escalation fails to meet the proportionality requirement. This could be seen as excessive force, violating the principle that force must be commensurate with the threat. Another incorrect approach, using a level of force significantly beyond what is necessary to control the situation, such as applying a chokehold when simple escorting would suffice, also constitutes excessive force and is ethically and legally indefensible. Furthermore, failing to disengage or reduce the level of force once the subject is compliant and no longer a threat is a critical failure, as the continuum requires force to be reduced as the threat diminishes. These failures expose the instructor and their organization to legal liability and undermine public trust in the security profession. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with threat assessment, followed by a consideration of available de-escalation options. If de-escalation is unsuccessful, the instructor must then select the lowest level of force on the continuum that is objectively reasonable and necessary to control the situation and ensure safety. Throughout the engagement, continuous reassessment of the threat and the subject's compliance is crucial, allowing for the reduction of force as the situation de-escalates. This iterative process ensures that force is always proportionate and justified. Question 20. Which approach would be most effective for a certified security instructor to manage a participant who is repeatedly interrupting the class with off-topic comments and challenging the instructor's authority in a manner that derails the lesson and frustrates other attendees, while adhering to professional conduct and fostering a positive learning environment? Option A. Ignore the disruptive comments, hoping the participant will eventually stop on their own, to avoid singling them out and potentially creating further conflict. Option B. Attempt to understand the underlying reasons for the participant's behavior through discreet, private conversation after the session, while gently redirecting the class back to the topic during the session and acknowledging the participant's input without dwelling on it. Option C. Publicly confront the participant, highlighting the negative impact of their behavior on the class and demanding an immediate cessation of the interruptions to re-establish order. Option D. Immediately issue a formal warning to the participant, threatening to remove them from the course if the behavior continues, to assert control and deter further disruption. The correct answer is B. Attempt to understand the underlying reasons for the participant's behavior through discreet, private conversation after the session, while gently redirecting the class back to the topic during the session and acknowledging the participant's input without dwelling on it. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security instructors, CSI, in managing a classroom environment. Professional challenge lies in balancing the need to maintain a structured and productive learning atmosphere with the ethical obligation to foster an inclusive and respectful space for all participants. Disruptive behavior, if not addressed effectively, can undermine the learning objectives, negatively impact the morale of other attendees, and potentially create an unsafe or intimidating environment, which is contrary to the professional standards expected of a CSI. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the disruption and apply an appropriate intervention that is both effective and proportionate. The correct approach involves a proactive and empathetic strategy that prioritizes understanding the underlying reasons for the disruptive behavior before implementing corrective measures. This approach aligns with the principles of adult learning and professional conduct expected of CSIs. By first seeking to understand the participant's perspective, the instructor can de-escalate the situation and address the issue constructively. This aligns with the ethical duty of care and the professional responsibility to ensure all participants feel valued and respected, thereby creating a positive learning environment conducive to effective knowledge transfer. Regulatory frameworks for professional instructors often emphasize creating a safe and supportive learning environment, which necessitates addressing disruptive behavior in a manner that respects individual dignity while upholding the integrity of the training. An approach that immediately resorts to punitive measures without attempting to understand the cause of the disruption is ethically flawed. This can alienate the participant, escalate the situation, and create a negative atmosphere for the entire class, failing to uphold the duty of care. Similarly, an approach that ignores the disruptive behavior entirely is professionally negligent. It undermines the learning experience for others, signals a lack of control, and fails to address potential underlying issues that might affect the participant or the group. An approach that focuses solely on the instructor's authority without considering the impact on the learner's engagement or the overall learning environment is also problematic, as it can be perceived as authoritarian and counterproductive to effective instruction. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with observation and assessment of the disruptive behavior. This should be followed by an attempt to understand the context and potential causes, perhaps through discrete inquiry or observation of nonverbal cues. Interventions should then be chosen based on their likely effectiveness in addressing the specific behavior while maintaining a positive learning environment. This involves considering the impact on the individual, the group, and the learning objectives, always striving for a resolution that is both fair and constructive.